Welcome back, everybody. My name is Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I got a bunch of new videos for you guys coming over the next couple weeks. I'm back right now in the SwiftUI Bootcamp, the original bootcamp on this channel that is getting way too long for a playlist, but we're going to keep adding to it because there's a couple things that I have either missed or are new in iOS 17 and I have not yet covered. This video is going to kick off the next bunch of videos, and in this video, we're going to look at the Navigation Split View. So if you think about some of the navigation components that we've covered so far in this playlist, specifically we've looked at Navigation View and Navigation Stack. Those are primarily what we're going to use for our navigation for almost every screen, especially on the iPhone. But those, when you push to the next screen, it transitions from the current screen to the next screen. The Navigation Split View allows you to have basically multiple screens, so 2 or 3 on the screen at the same time. And you're probably thinking, well, the screen's pretty small, right? If I'm building on an iPhone, I only want one screen at a time, and that's the right answer. And so I think what you're gonna realize in this video is the Navigation Split View is awesome, it's really cool, but it's primarily for larger devices. So specifically, we're gonna be looking at iPads, but this is also gonna be relevant for something like building on the Mac or the tvOS. However, most of the time we're gonna be building iPhone apps on this channel, and we're probably not gonna want this Navigation Split View. So in this video, we're going to learn how it works, how to use it, and then look at a couple different implementations. Because as you're going to see, there are a couple tips and tricks to getting this to work the right way, and we're going to walk through that together. That's all from me. Let's jump into Xcode and write some code. And we are back. I am again in Xcode here. I'm in the SwiftUI Bootcamp project, the original project from this channel, and we're going to add a new file. As you guys can see, this playlist has gotten way longer than I had originally expected, but let's keep adding to it. We're going to right-click the navigator, create a new file. It'll be a SwiftUI view, and let's call this one Navigation Split View Bootcamp. And let's click Create. Let's get the preview going here. And before we begin, I just want to throw out there that the Navigation Split View, the reason I haven't really covered it yet is because the primary use case is going to be for iPad apps. And we can also use it a little bit for macOS apps, and probably there's some use case in the future for visionOS. But if we're building an iPhone app, which is the most common case for iOS developers, the Navigation Split View is really not going to be needed. I'll show you guys how we can configure it for iOS. But generally speaking, this is something that comes to mind when I'm building an iPad app. Do I want to add a Navigation Split View? Yes or no? All right, so let's jump in here and let's keep it simple at first. Let's type in Navigation Split View, and I can see all these completions here. We're gonna look for the simplest ones right now, just for this one has sidebar and detail. This one has sidebar content and detail. Let's just go with the sidebar and detail because it's the simplest one right now. I'm going to hold the option button and click enter so that I get the full completion here. So these are both closures that are going to return some sort of view. So we know right now, Navigation Split View, this is probably one part of the view, and this is probably the other side of the split, right? Sidebar and detail. So let's click enter here, and let's just make this one color.red, and we'll make this one color.blue. Now again, this is primarily going to be for iPad. And as you can see here, when we have an iPhone simulator, all we see is this first screen. We don't see this second detail screen at all. You don't see the blue anywhere. And that's because it lays out differently on iOS versus iPadOS. So for the rest of this video, we're basically going to be focusing on iPadOS, and then towards the end, I'll talk a little bit about how to use it with iOS. Let's switch our simulator now to a iPad. Let's go with the iPad Pro. And we can see here, this lays out a little differently. Now I see only the second screen, and there's this little button up at the top left here. This is going to be the menu button to show the sidebar. Remember when we were writing this code a couple seconds ago, the first view was called the sidebar and the second one was the detail. So this little button up here must be referencing the sidebar. So if I go and I look at it, let's compile it one more time. Sidebar is the red section, and then this is the blue section here. So we basically have two screens. This is a nice menu that is coming up on top of this screen here. And we're going to play around with a bunch of configurations of this for the rest of this video. But first and foremost, let's notice that there's another completion here for Navigation Split View that has sidebar content and detail. So this looks basically the same thing, except for it has 3 closures. And so if we click enter on these, let's make this one red, this one blue, and then this one will do .green. Let's delete this. And now we can see, again, we have the green, the detail is showing here, but if I click the sidebar button, it's going to show me the blue menu, so this content menu. If I click back here, it's going to show me this red menu here. So now let's dive into some of the layout for this. So firstly, when we have this iPad in portrait mode, right, and we click the simulator button here, we have just the detail view, and then we click these buttons and we can get the menus. But if I move it and I switch it into landscape, you'll notice that as soon as this loads, we don't only see the green, but we also see the blue. So being in landscape mode first is going to give us a different UI layout than what we had when we were in portrait mode, right? So now we start with seeing the blue here, and then I can click this and we can get the red. So again, this is really adapting to the device and the device orientation that you have, which for some developers, that's going to be awesome. But for a lot of apps, it's going to be confusing because it's more difficult for the developer to monitor all of these states. But luckily, we can customize that layout portion of the navigation split view. So let's play around with some of these layout configurations. So if I create another navigation split view, we can see that there's actually a parameter called column visibility that we have not looked at yet. Column visibility, which is a binding of type navigation split view visibility. So it's binding, which tells us that we need to hold some sort of state. So up here, I'm going to create an @state. Let's make it a private var. Let's call it visibility. And we'll make this of type. Looks like we need a navigation split view visibility. So let's call navigation split view visibility. And let's set it equal to .automatic for now. Automatic is the default. And let's actually just put this binding inside our code here. And let's bind to it with the $, get that binding visibility. So as you can see, when I have this automatic and the iPad is in landscape mode, the default visibility of these columns is that I can see the blue and I can see the green here. But now if I switch it back to portrait mode and I reload the app, the default visibility is going to be just the detail, just the green. So on automatic, it's going to change based on the device orientation and the device that you're on. But I can also just force this to be either detail only or double column. So if I keep it on detail only, that when I load this view for the first time, we can see that it's just the detail, just the green. And if I switch it back to landscape and I load it up the first time, previously we were seeing the blue at the start, but now we are only seeing the green. So again, if this was automatic, the default is going to be whatever the system tells us. So it's showing us this column as well as the green. But if I keep this on a detail only, then as soon as I load the screen, we're going to start on the detail, the green section, and then we can navigate with the menus backwards. For me, most of the time, I'm starting with the menus rather than starting with the detail screen. So I often am using the double column version of this, which is this version to start. So we can see the blue and the green here. If I switch it back to portrait mode and I reload it, the first version of this screen is going to have the blue and the green now, not just the green. As soon as I load it up, the blue will be on there. And it's important to note that this is double column, not triple column. So if we had this navigation split view without the third layer, so just 2 layers, if I delete this, it's going to be just those 2 layers, so the red and the green. Or we have the blue and the green, but there's no triple column, at least today. So if you want to start with 2 columns, double column. If you want to start with just the detail screen, make this .detail only. So column visibility is when we load up this view, how many columns do we want showing on the screen? That's the column visibility. We got that down, and it is binding because as the user clicks around the columns, it's going to change. That's why we have to make this a state. So we're really just telling it the starting state, and then obviously we can change this programmatically, but most of the time it's your starting state and then you're binding to it so the user can click around. The next question is, when the user gets to this detail screen, this third screen here, how big do we want this to display? So right now, if I go to this view right here, the left edge of the green is right here. But what if I want this green to be the full screen? And I want this column to actually push all the way over to the edge so that I only see the green at the full level here. Well, there's another modifier, NavigationSplitView style. So automatic is what's on by default, and balanced is what we're seeing right now. Balanced means there's going to be a balance between this column and this column. Alternatively, I can throw in the prominent detail. Remember, this view here, this third view, is called the detail view. This is the green view here. And we're going to make it more prominent. So when prominent detail comes, you can see that the actual menu changed a little bit here. Again, I'll undo this, balanced. The menu itself looks a little bit different, and that's because this new version of the menu is actually above the green screen, not to the left of it. So when I look at this, the green now goes to the entire width of the screen, and the menu pops above the detail screen. So this is good if we want to make this final screen full width, and then have the menus pop in on top, versus if I keep it balanced, now I just get this area is the green and the menus push to the left. So the green area gets smaller when the menus push in here. Two different styles. Again, it really just depends on what you're trying to do. All right, so that is the basics of how we get this to work. So now let's go through some examples of actually using data with this kind of screen layout here. All right, let's get some fake data going here. I'm going to create, let's do it down here. Let's create an enum. Let's call this food category. So we're going to pretend like we're going to the grocery store and we got to go get some fruits and some vegetables and things like that. Let's create a couple cases here. We have a fruits section, we have some vegetables, and let's say we have some meats. Each of these, let's give it a raw value of a string, and let's maybe make them case iterable so that we can loop on these three items. So let's load this up here, and the food category is going to be where the red column is. And when the user gets to this screen, I actually want the user to see all three columns. I don't want them to be just on the detail screen to start. So let's change the visibility here. Let's start it at .all. So I have all three columns on my screen here. Let's change out the red to actually be what we want. So in here, I'm going to put in a list, and we'll do a for each. We'll loop on for each food category.all cases, and this will be each category in. All right, we're looping on each item in all cases, but we need to make sure that each item in there is either identifiable or hashable. So these are going to be hashable because they have a string as a raw value. So I'll loop on the raw value string. Let's do the category raw value capitalized. All right, fruits, vegetables, meats are in the first column here where the red used to be. Let's give this a nav title of, let's call this categories. And as you guys are going to see when we get into this, the UI of this split view is pretty limited. Like, we're going to want to use basically lists and navigation titles. We're not going to want to create and customize our own. So that is a net negative for a lot of apps, but if you can use the default UI, it's very seamless. Like, I really like how they let us put a title just on this column rather than having it on the entire screen. But again, this UI is going to get pretty limited as we move forward here. So we got each item for the categories. And now if we click on one, if I click on fruits, let's put a list of fruits where the blue is here. Let's create another enum here. I'll call it maybe fruit. Let's also make a raw value of string, make these case iterable, and let's just do a couple fruits, apple, banana, orange. And what we're going to do is when we click on one of these, we're going to make it the selected fruit. So up here, I'll create an @state private var selected category of type food category. We'll make it optional. We'll set it equal to nil. Food category, spelled that one wrong. All right, let's make these buttons. Button with a title. Title is going to be this. Action will be selected category equals the category. All right, and in this content now, for the detail, we'll say if let selected category. So if we get the selected category, let's do another list with the for each. Let's just copy this code right here. Well, it depends which category it is that we're selecting. So let's just switch on selected category. And if we get fruits, we're going to want to put another list of the fruits here. So I'm just going to copy this code here quickly. Let's just do the list. And let's put it down in the fruits. And for now, let's just make an empty view for vegetables and an empty view for meats, because I'm not going to build out that UI. And here we're going to loop on each fruit. So let's do fruit.allCases. Let's leave this out for a second. This will be fruit raw value in. And let's just put this entire switch statement into a group so that on the group we can add a .nav title with the selected category .raw value capitalized. All right, if I click on fruits, we can see the fruits pop up here. And if I added some other logic for vegetables and meats, when I clicked on those, we would see them pop up as well. Fruits, and now we got fruits in the middle column, which is cool. And let's add one more. If I click on a fruit, I want to add in the detail screen here. So one more time. These are buttons, right? So let's do up here another selected fruit of type fruit. And we'll set selected fruit equal to the fruit. And then down here where the green is, we'll say if let selected fruit. Let's just put a text that says you selected. And let's put in the selected fruit.raw value. Let's give it a font of maybe large title. And let's put a nav title here of selected fruit, a raw value capitalized. All right, I click on fruits, I click on apple, you selected apple, bang. Not the most beautiful UI, but you guys are getting how this works now. The primary use case for this layout is going to be you have some sort of detail screen that you want the user to get to, and that detail screen has some sort of parent menu, which will be this. And if that detail screen needs another parent menu, it would be this. So again, you can do this layout with 2 columns or 3 columns. You don't need to have 3 columns. But that is the limitation here. You cannot do 4 columns. You'd have to write your own custom logic here. So we're basically just focused on 2 to 3 columns using the navigation split view. Awesome. All right, a couple things to point out here is if we load up the screen, but we don't click on anything, you can see column 2 and column 3 have no UI here. And that's a pretty poor UI layout for most apps. So we want to make sure that we are catching those statements. So here, if there's nothing selected for category, we want to do some sort of text, select a category to begin. So you want to make sure that you're handling these edge cases as well for your user. And we might want to do something on the third screen as well, some sort of notice, select something, right? And what I'm leaving unsaid here is that there are going to be use cases where you start with data in these screens. So if I loaded this screen up and there already was a selected fruit and a selected category, then the user could start with that edge case. And you can build this UI so that maybe these are not optional and there's always something that the user is going to see. That's probably a better use case than what we're going through right now, but it really depends on your app and what you want it to look like. Before we wrap up here, I do want to talk a little bit about actually the navigation between these and how to also use this on iOS. Because if we look and we switch this to iOS real quick, let's make it vertical. If I click these, nothing happens. Because I made these buttons and they're connected to our local at state, but the iOS version doesn't actually do anything with the split view. Because we can see here only one screen, we can't see the second screen, we can't see the third screen. That sucks. And for that reason, most of the time in my app, I would have something in my app like if the user is using iPad, go to the navigation split view, but if they're on iPhone, just go to a different view and not even worry about the navigation split view on iPhone. That's personally how I would do it. But what I'm going to show you guys now is how we would get this to work if we want to keep this logic and this code for the iPhone as well. And it's actually a trick which I don't fully understand, but I'm going to show you guys what it is. It's basically connecting the for each and the selection all into the list component itself. Kind of confusing, kind of annoying that it doesn't work out of the box, but all we have to do is basically create a list where instead of just getting a closure, we're actually inputting the data directly into the list. So let's create a list here, and we're going to type in selection, and you'll see that a bunch of these list completions have selection values as well. So let's click on maybe this one, identifiable. I think we can use hashable, so let's do this one. Looks fine. All right, so let's copy the food category to all cases as well as the ID here, and let's paste that inside the list. The selection, let's make this binding to selected category, and then we'll press enter on the row. This will be each category in, and let's put in here, let's copy our button, put it in here. I'll comment out this code. All right, all we've done so far is taken our list and a for each and combined that into one solid thing here. And the biggest difference is that we added a binding to the selected category. So now if I load up my app real quick and I click on one of these fruits, it actually does bring me into the next screen here. So we can see that it is actually being selected. So this is doable, and this is going to get you a much more customizable UI where you're creating your own button and you can add your own custom logic for what you're selecting. But in most cases, what we really want to do is this UI here, where we have the selection binded in directly. So here we used a button and made the selected category the food category. I'm going to delete this, and let's actually copy this code here and paste it down here for our list of fruits. Let's do fruit.allCases. This one will be binding to the selected fruit. This will be fruit in. Let's cut our button from here, put our button right here, delete this list. I click on fruits, I can click on banana, and now we're on a third screen banana. All right, so we got our navigation split view working for iOS, even though it looks like regular navigation on iOS. All right, let's switch back to iPad real quick. Let's go into landscape mode. I can click on fruits and I get apple here. Awesome. One more thing I'm going to do before we wrap up is instead of using a regular button here, let's actually change this to be a navigation link. And let's look for the title key and value. So when we use the navigation stack, we learned all about navigation links and how to use the hashable value here. So what I'm going to do is actually make the title this, and the value is going to be our selected category actually right here. Let's delete this button here. All right, so I got fruits, and when I click on it, I click get on apple, and let's change this navigation link down here. Let's change this button to a navigation link as well. We'll do fruits, and we'll do fruit. And one more time, if I click on fruits and I click on banana, you can see now that there's actually UI here of this being selected. So again, if I revert back to being buttons, this one's not a button, so we can see that selection here. But when I click on apple, there's no selected UI. But if I make it a navigation link and I click on apple, selected UI. So do not ask me why this is the case, but Navigation Split View seems to work best with the list that is automatically binding to a selection and navigation links that are automatically selecting that category. So writing your own buttons is doable, but it doesn't look as good. This is probably the way that we should lay out these views going forward. Again, I'm going to switch back to iPhone real quick. Let's go back into portrait mode, and we can see fruits, banana, banana. So it's working on both iPad and iOS at this point. All right, that's all I wanted to show you guys today. Again, this is primarily a layout for the iPad, and most apps probably never going to need this, but this is a great UI if you have some sort of tiered hierarchy that you want to show to the user. You have a main screen and you have a menu on the left or something like that. We can do navigation split view with 2 views or 3 views depending on your UI. And you can use lists to bind to selections directly if you want to. And navigation links seem to work the best there. Overarching, I would say this is great for building iPad, macOS apps, maybe some visionOS stuff in the future. But generally for iOS, I would not even add this into the code base, or I would have some sort of logic that's just, if we're going to be on iOS show this UI, and if we're going to be on iPad, show the navigation split view. Either way, now you guys know how to use it. So go ahead and start trying to customize it. You will see that you are limited in what you can customize here. Again, a lot of this UI is by the book iOS UI that we cannot customize. But if this is what we're going for, this is a seamless user experience and definitely something that you should think about if you're building an iPad app. Thank you guys for watching. As always, my name is Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.